Welcome back to Business Talk Radio. We are joined once again today by Dr. Harry Aponte, based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And today he has the lovely Najeen here joining us. Please introduce yourself to our listeners today.
My name is Negin Musavian. I'm an associate marriage family therapist based out of LA, supervised by Kurt Widhelm.
Fantastic. And Dr. Harry Aponte, what brings this beautiful union happening today?
Well, we had a good experience some time ago that I thought it'd be worth sharing with other people. We've I have talked about using ourselves, our own personal life experience when we're working with clients. And my idea of the relationship between the therapist and the client is that it's a human connection within the framework of a professional purpose. So yes, it's certainly professional. It has to be professional, but at the very heart of it, it has to be very human. And the connection needs to be very genuine and for real. And Nagin and I had discussed a case some time ago that she was having some real difficulty with. And she was getting very frustrated with this particular client of hers. And when she mentioned to me that she had already gone through what this client was going through, I said, well, does your client know that you've been through that? And she said, no. And I said, Negin, why don't you just in some way or another communicate that you know what she's going through? And she did, and she's got a good story around that.
Great. Well, welcome. And again, just want to point out where you're from, and do you have a website we can contact you? Let's get that established off the top as well.
Yeah, I'm from Los Angeles, and I do have a website. It's Therapy with Negin on all platforms, even Instagram too.
Perfect. And Harry J. Aponte, of course, is Dr. Aponte's website as well. So please, let's get started. And thank you for sharing your story here with us live on Business Talk Radio today.
Tell us your story. Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I have a client of mine. I was feeling really frustrated with this client in particular. Every time I would leave session, I would feel heavy. I didn't enjoy going into the session. And a lot of the reason was because it was so surface level. And everything she would talk about, I would be like, okay, why can't you see what I see now? And it was because there was a disconnect. I couldn't relate to her in where she was in the here and now. I was telling her where she should be. And so I talked to Harry about this case, and it changed everything. So Harry, do you want to kind of guide the listeners on what you did with me that helped?
Well, it was really relatively simple, because there was I felt your frustration, and I felt that the frustration was keeping you separate from her, emotionally separate. Mm-hmm. That when you talked about being frustrated every time you saw her, and the experience was one that you didn't look forward to sit down with her because she talked over you repeatedly, and so you couldn't get your point across. And even if you got your point out there, she wasn't listening to it, and she was just sort of repelling you. And you were working with her for quite a while. She's not too different from your age, and you knew what she was going through. And then you said to me, I've been there, I've done that, and I'm over it, and I see how, useless this is, what she's allowing herself to get into. And so I said, does she know that you've been there? And you said no. And I said, well, can you somehow communicate to her that you really do know what she's talking about, so that she doesn't feel like a specimen that you're talking to, but she feels like, okay, this is another human being, another woman. Yep. This is another human being who knows what I've been through, because I've been there. And you said, okay, I'll try that. And so then that's your story to tell.
So basically, I kind of want to fill everyone in on the dynamic of the therapeutic relationship. So I've seen her for a year. Every time we would meet, it was all about, okay, I went on a date with this guy. I went on a date with another guy. I've talked to another guy. And every time I would try to dig deeper, you know, like, let's talk about the patterns that you're repeating. Let's talk about your family stuff. She would talk over me. She would interrupt me. She wouldn't even allow me to even speak. It's almost like you're paying a therapist to kind of give you advice, but you're not actually listening to me. You just basically want someone to vent to. Okay. But after a year, it gets to you. And every time I was like, why does she keep interrupting me? Everything I want to say, even her values. I'm like, let's talk about your values. No, go back to dating stuff. I'm like, all right, I guess we just go with the flow now. And I would just leave the session feeling so drained. You know, like, as much as you want to help everybody, at the end of the day, I would dread going to the session and I would feel depleted leaving. And so when I met with Harry, he asked me, well, why do you feel this way? And I'm like, well, because I get it. I was like that. I always was concerned about getting married and dating. And even in my own therapy, I would focus on this stuff. And he was like, well, why don't you relate to her with that? Why don't you talk about that? I'm like, I can't do that. I have to talk about my own pain in the therapy session. Yeah, that's how you relate to her. You can't get her to see where you are now unless you go back. So take what you went through and relate that to her. And I said that, I brought it up to her. I was like, I get that, you know, you're mid 20s, late 20s, you want to get married. We're Iranian. It's in our culture and all this stuff. And she loosened up a bit. And then I also told her, when we start to talk about stuff that's deeper, you interrupt me. You don't allow me, you know, I feel frustrated. And then she was like, all right, yeah, I tend to do that a lot with my family, or even when I go on dates, I interrupt them. And I was like, there we go.
Oh,
Finally, a breakthrough.
and just, if you don't mind me asking, the initial consultation with her, and why did she come to see you? Was it a relationship issue? Was it a personal self-esteem issue? Why did you seek your help in therapy?
That's a great question. I missed that part. But in the intake, it said her goal for therapy was marriage.
Okay.
So her main purpose was, you know, I'm 28, I'm not married, I must have a problem. So that's why I'm going to therapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So find me a husband.
I'm like the Match.com over here. But it was interesting, because even the first session she came in, I was kind of blown away. I was like, but I get it in the culture. I'm Iranian. I'm also in my 20s. I understand where she's coming from, but I didn't connect that way. I was sitting like, why can't she see what I'm seeing?
Yeah.
And that was the disconnect. That's why for so long she couldn't see what I was trying to tell her.
I imagine she must have been, if she kept coming back with about another date and another date, I imagine these relationships didn't end very well for her.
No, and she couldn't make it through the past couple, like she would go on one date, another date, and then it would end. And so it was only actually, Harry, you don't know this, but after our work and me channeling this with my relationship with her, I started to be more comfortable to ask her deeper questions in terms of, what are the behaviors you're doing that are pushing people away from you? There's no way I would have been able to say these things before. It's only until I feel like as a therapist, it's only until you're comfortable sharing your own experience and relating that to the client, that's when, if you're having difficulty, you've got to bring yourself in. And it's when you realize that connection happens.
Yeah, so what you did, you engaged her in understanding the relationship that the two of you had. And it mirrored to some extent what she was experiencing on her dates, that she was turning people off.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that it was not only that you had been through some of this, but you were also reliving it with her. And you brought yourself personally into it by saying, look what's going on between us.
Exactly.
Not just that I've been there. So this is
a microcosm.
Yeah. So this is at a couple of different levels, is what I'm saying. One is I've been there and I understand, but the other one is I'm experiencing you this way, and this is why you're getting so disappointed and things aren't working out for you because I'm having trouble with you. So it's taking a risk, is putting ourselves as a therapist at a certain, we're exposing ourselves. Who wants to say to a client, I'm getting frustrated with you, I'm not able to get through to you.
I'm feeling unheard and all of
right?
that.
And all of that, yes. And when you really presented yourself as a person who happens to be a therapist, okay, and who was interested in what she was going through, the woman opened up to you.
Yeah, even to the point where she'll ask me, well, I wish you could be like a fly on the wall on this date and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Like, what is it that I'm doing wrong? I'm like, well, let's talk about this right now. You tend to interrupt me. Like, when I started bringing this dynamic into, like, analyzing it and bringing up to her, she started to realize it's not just about the dates. She does this in other relationship dynamics, whether it's with her family, whether even with the therapist. I'm like, look, you're doing the same thing. You're interrupting. It's interesting, because I do think that in a therapeutic setting, it's a microcosm to other settings in your life. So it's very vital for therapists to use that to bring it up to the client.
Yeah, because it's immediate, but it's also in a context where when you share that with her, you are also implicitly sharing, I do care about you and what you're going through, and I don't want to see you fail. Mm-hmm. And this is why I'm telling you this. You didn't present it as a complaint. Why don't you let me talk so that you can change and solve your problems? What you were presenting was, we're having a problem right here, and I'm here committed to being of help to you. So you made it safe for her to take a risk, to acknowledge a certain weakness of hers.
And I think the reason why I started realizing why it triggers me that she interrupts me all the time. I was like, why does this bug me so much? And you asked me, well, what is it in your own family dynamic? And I'm like, yeah, well, I would get interrupted a lot. Everyone would talk over each other. So I used that and I said, I get it. I get why sometimes you interrupt me. You want your voice to be heard. Maybe in your family, your voice isn't heard. I've gone through that. And that's when she started being like, okay, you get what I've gone through. You've experienced it. And that's the key. We sit here like authoritative figures, like we know everything. But once we say we've gone through the same thing, I think it opens up a different door.
Yeah, it's to empathize is something so different than to just understand. You can empathize. You've been through similar, same pain as her and frustration. So I think that's super important to know. And we've discussed this before, Dr. Aponte and I, about how, some therapists there are out there who I even know who really haven't gone through much, or at least they still don't want to talk about what they've gone through. So they don't really empathize. And I just think they don't make the best choices for certain people. Personal experience with someone I know, but it's nice to know that you can wear your heart on your shoulder, be honest about who you are. Yes, we've all had downfalls. We have ups, we have downs, but you know what? We are who we are. It makes us a better person. And I think the more experiences we have in our lives, negative, positive, makes us better people. And for you to understand people better, and me as a broadcaster to talk to people and communicate with people. Hey, we're all here in this together, and we're all not flawless. Sometimes we like to pretend to be, right? But we're all made out of flaws, and it makes us who we are. And I think that makes us better people, better listeners, better therapists, and better broadcasters.
Well, I don't think that we could really feel what another person is experiencing unless we can be connected with our own life experiences when we're talking with them, when we're trying to engage them. It's an unconscious thing. We can cry for somebody, but when we cry for somebody, at some level we're identifying with them. At some level, it says, if this were happening to me, it would be this bad. And the fact that we have this capacity because of our own suffering to relate to somebody else's suffering, it puts us in a place where we don't just hear with our ears, we hear with our hearts. And then the person can feel, I'm not a freak, You know, I'm not somebody who's different from everybody else, and you're another God who's got it all together and doesn't know what pain is. But so that if we can come across in a way that says it really is safe for you to be vulnerable with me, then that tends to open the door.
Because we all go through pain. We've all had suffering. Why not use that to help relate to your clients? You know, I think it's almost, it's deceitful when you act like you haven't gone through anything. We've all gone through stuff.
And just curious, in your field, is there a line that you are or not allowed to cross when it comes to your clients? Are you, I'm assuming it's okay to share your personal experiences. How does that work with your guidelines? Just curious.
So we're taught, I think, in school to be a blank slate, and that's not always, it's
Really?
not a law. It's not like a legal obligation. If anything, I think when you stop being a blank slate, that's when the growth happens. That's when the connection gets deeper. That's, I think, the key to actually good therapeutic relationship is to be human and share your stuff. It's a human connection.
You know, the birth of this, and I've talked about this before on the program, Julia, I think you've heard me, goes back to Sigmund Freud, because he developed a form of therapy, psychoanalysis, where the person who's being analyzed is on a couch, is not looking at the therapist, and then the analyst is behind that person and not really engaging that person face to face and keeping silent a good part of the time, so that then the person who's on the couch then begins to imagine and think about, well, whatever comes to mind. What's my analyst thinking? How does my analyst feel about me? Is my analyst looking down at me because I'm such a mess? You know, because the original direction you get from the analyst, at least the traditional one, is whatever comes to your mind, say it. You know, don't edit it out, just put it out there. And so when there's a lack of response from the analyst, the person on the couch tends to begin to feel alone, tends to go back to experiences that he or she had, you know, in some part of their life where they weren't loved, they weren't appreciated, they weren't really responded to. And then they begin to talk about all those painful things. And so that's what they call transference. And then you start, the person on the couch begins to imagine that the analyst is feeling this way or that way, going back to experiences that the person on the couch had. Well, Sigmund Freud said, if you're going to do this work, then you have to be like a surgeon. You know, so you don't share any part of yourself. You want them to imagine, and so they bring back their own past experiences in their transference to the analyst. Well, people took that directive and brought it into the future, but we're now facing our clients face to face, engaging in a direct human relationship where you really can't do that and have it work. It worked under his framework, the way he was doing it, his technique, but it doesn't work today. And today you have to engage the person directly and know how to use yourself in order to make it a safe place for your patient to be able to say, hey, I'm broken, I'm hurt, can you help me? Mm-hmm. You're nodding your head, yes.
I think that's so true. It's like from the very beginning, if you think about it, when clients look you up, they know about you. This whole theory of like sitting on a couch and not knowing what your therapist is thinking or seeing, it's so dated. And so that's why I like to call myself a modern therapist. We like to talk about our own struggles with our clients. That's how they relate to you. You got to break down those barriers. You have to show your authenticity. And I think that was key. And it's funny because I've been told this, and it wasn't until Harry told me his own story with his own client he had in the past where he said, and I'm sure you want to share this story, but
go ahead.
Yeah, and that's when he told me this, I started feeling comfortable to start sharing my own struggles with my clients and with you.
Can you share that story now? Because now I'm curious. You have no choice.
Again, what story was that? Because there's several stories that I like to tell about
The,
myself.
the client that you had where he was scaring you, where you told him like, I'm afraid or I'm scared.
Oh, right, that one. Yeah, that was the couple where I said to the woman, "You don't trust your husband," and then she said, "No, I don't trust him." And then the husband got really, just for some reason, right then and there, he just lost control, and he just towered over her, big guy, and he was acting in a very threatening way. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't let this guy hurt this woman. I'm going to have to get in there, even if he is bigger than I am, you know. But that went back to my own, you know, life in Harlem and in South Bronx as a kid. You never showed your fear. You always had to stand up for yourself. I had my own bully that I finally intimidated one day that got me through it, you know, and all of that came up for me. You know, I'm going to be the tough kid, you know, from the streets, from the hood. And then something in me said, you know, that's not what a therapist does. and but because of my own self-reflection, I also knew that there was a fear behind that I was covering up, a fear that if I do engage physically, okay, I'm likely to get hurt, but I can't show my fear. And if I show my fear, then the other guy knows he has advantage over me. And I thought at that moment, I said to myself, wait a minute now, this guy now is feeling attacked. It won't help him to be attacked. What will help him is to feel his vulnerability because he felt hurt by what his wife said and what I said. So then I got into my vulnerable self, and something I never said to another guy in my life. I said, hey, Joe, you know something? I'm scared of you right now. And the guy just looked at me. He couldn't believe it. He really was shocked. And he said, are you really scared of me? I said, yeah. I'm afraid you're going to hurt her, and I'm going to have to get involved, and you're going to hurt me. The guy started to cry. You know, when I showed my vulnerability, he allowed his vulnerability to come to the foreground. And then he looked at his wife and said, is this what I'm doing to you? And she said, yes. That's the story.
Beautiful story. I got goosebumps and little
I
tears.
know. I'm like, I tear up every time he tells the story. I'm like, wow.
You make me cry. I've learned this last week. But always
Yes,
love
that's fact.
it's good to bring out our emotions with your stories and your experiences for all of us. And, you know, I appreciate you guys sharing this here with us. Also, I want to point out just one thing. How did the two of you become connected? How did you reach out to Dr. Harry Aponte? How did you know him, or did you have friends of friends who knew him?
So I'm a director of a conference, like a modern therapist conference called Therapy Reimagined. And
On your Instagram.
It's on my Instagram. You'll see it.
I saw it on there.
Oh, you did? You did? Yeah. So
I looked it up while we were
So yeah, and my supervisor actually is the co-founder of this conference, and he knew about this case that I had and said, you know, this would be a great case for you to talk about with Dr. Aponte. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And we had a connection. We met I think it was like 5 times in the course before the conference. And it only took 2 weeks. And the advice he gave me was amazing. And so from then on, that's how the dynamic happened.
Oh, that's sweet. So what do you think about that, Dr. Harry Aponte? All these people looking up to you, and, you know, you're a mentor to some of them. You have, well, you know, a little more years of experience than Nadine here, right? So it's good to have that wiseness, that experience that you could also, and, you know, in your practice, you still make the time to help others in your field, which is so nice.
Well, you know, she was learning something, and I could give her something. But the reality is that I'm always learning when I'm sitting down with clients, and clients are always challenging me in some way or another in a very personal way. And so I gain from that, because each time I'm sitting with a client, I don't know what's really going on. I don't know how I'm really going to help this person. I have all of these tricks of the trade, but I don't know whether I'm going to be able to make the connection that's going to make the difference. So for me, every encounter with a client is a new adventure. It's a new risk. It's a new putting myself, in a vulnerable position. Am I going to fail or am I not going to fail? So, she's younger than I am and she's learning, but at my age, after many years of practice, I am still wondering whether I'm going to make it work. And I know that I have to get to the point of opening my heart up to people if I'm going to make that connection.
Great. And at this time of the show, we will take our commercial break. Just want to get your best forms of contact for both of you.
HarryJAponte.com.
Perfect.
Therapywithnagin.com.
Perfect. And at this time, we'll take that break. We'll log back in here on Zoom right after the break.
Hey everybody, my name is Ralph Graves Jr. I'm the host of the Ralph Graves Jr. Show, and I want to invite you to pick up my book, Unstoppable. I wrote a book called Unstoppable. It's 7 universal laws that will transform how you pursue and achieve success. The one thing that my 20 years of law enforcement has taught me is that no matter who you are, we are all governed by universal laws, like gravity. But in this book, we're going to talk about laws like the law of forgiveness, laws like the law of control, the law of intelligent practice, the law of expectancy. I was able to see how those, no matter what their background was, those who identified and treated these laws with respect, they were able to go on and lead successful lives. So pick up this book, and you can go ahead and pick it up at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, RalphGravesJr.com, where anywhere where fine books are sold. Thank you.
There are 7.7 billion people on Earth today. 40% of these people are under the age of 25. Young adults are the most fertile mission field in the world today. In Scripture, we see Jesus pouring his life into 12 young adults who he equipped to change the world and all of history. Like Jesus, we believe that the best approach to reach the world with the gospel is to invest in young, emerging leaders and equip them to build disciple-making movements. Concentric is the notion of surrounding and sharing a common center. Our center is the model and strategy of Jesus for both leadership development and ministry formation. As a global alliance, we provide equipping in biblical leadership based on Jesus' example in the New Testament. Jesus modeled for us how to make disciples that reproduce. Focusing on leadership development is key to creating movements that spread the gospel and Jesus' disciple-making strategy to young leaders around the globe. Our Ministry Alliance partners are actively equipping leaders and building movements of multiplication that reproduce the life of Christ. Join us today to equip young leaders with Jesus' strategy that will change cities and nations.
The session that we had with BCAT was really entertaining and enlightening. We were able to put together some very specific steps that we as individuals can take, and it was really fun to all come together and see sort of where we're going as a team and how we can all get there together.
We had a tremendous experience with the BCAT partners. One of the challenges that we have as an organization is to make sure that we have the right people in the right chairs doing the right thing. To do that well, you have to have synergy. You can try to dream up ways to make sure that your group does that, or you can rely on experts. We would recommend BCAT partners to anybody who's looking to take their organization to the next level.
Academy Sedan and Limo is a full-service transportation company serving the Philadelphia metropolitan area with full knowledge of the New York City, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. areas. We pride ourselves on being the most dependable, conscientious company in the industry. Our always on-time service and dependable pricing make us the company to call for any event or occasion. Our vehicles can accommodate any size party for any occasion. Our vehicles range from four-door sedans to SUVs to minivans to limo buses to full-size tour buses and can accommodate groups of 2 to 100. We offer airport shuttle service or over-the-road service without limitation regarding mileage or time, and no drive is too long or too far. So if you find yourself in need of transportation of any type with any vehicle, give us a call at 610-842-4564 and let us show you what a real transportation company can do for you.
Have you just lost your job or have been laid off and you are looking to transition to a new job or career? Maybe you have even tried submitting tons of applications and yet you keep getting turned down for jobs you qualify for. Don't wait until you become overwhelmed with rejections when you can easily transition or get your dream job. Let MJW Careers guide you to the right career path and a better, brighter future. At MJW Careers, we know what hiring managers are looking for, and our goal is to land you the job you deserve. What makes MJW Careers a wonderful provider over other services is our pragmatic and scientific approach to resume writing. There are rules, there are visual cues, there are content best practices. We understand those and work within the boundaries to ensure our clients' messaging appeals to the decision makers. Our career consultants will help you transition into new roles quickly and effectively. With our experience in virtually every industry, we will provide direction in the frustrating job market by helping you write a customized, professional resume and prepare you for your interview as well. Join the great number of people we have helped scale up to greater things in their careers. Let us help you on your career journey. Come visit us, www.jobstickers.com, to learn more and grab a free resume review or ebook.
Located at 121 Haddon Avenue in Westmont, New Jersey, is Margie Cedrone, artisan jeweler. Margie's been in business for more than 30 years. She works with her clients to create custom pieces of jewelry to reflect their personality and help them make their own bold statement. Starting in the renowned Jewelers Row in Center City, Philadelphia in 1988, Margie works directly with her clients to develop one-of-a-kind pieces such as necklaces, engagement rings, wedding bands, unique watches and tennis bracelets, as well as a myriad of rings and earrings for everyone in your family. She also has worked directly with Dr. Jacqueline over the years, creating unique pieces of jewelry to reflect her personality. She does pearl stringing and repairs on site at 121 Haddon Avenue. Call or text Margie at 215-384-7155. Margie Cedrone Jewelry is open by appointment only. Make your own bold statement.
Have you ever tried to build people into a team? Maybe you've tried bowling, or ziplining, or paintball, or pizza making. These events can be fun, and they can make everybody happy for a while. But in the long run, do they really turn people into a team? Now, imagine the members of your team scattered all over the world, working from trains and airplanes, from remote offices, client locations, or working from home. How do you build a winning team when your playing field might be the entire world? With BCAT, we've created the answer. Working completely online, no matter where your people are, we turn them into an engaged and motivated team in 3 simple steps. First, we use the BCAT survey, which they can take online, anywhere, anytime, to reveal the North Star that represents their shared pride in the work they do. Next, we work with your team's leaders and stakeholders to convert that North Star into a role target, an ideal virtual person who represents your team's best self, living its best day at work. With our internet tools, we hang your North Star high in the sky, where everyone on your team can see it, no matter where in the world they might be. Then we guide and help everyone on your team in creating personal plans to align themselves with your team's North Star. We help each of them develop the positive habits that, day by day, every day, steer them closer to your North Star, aligning themselves with your team's signature dreams and ideals. And over the long haul, we offer programs and coaching techniques that help them stick to their plans. Remote team building isn't hard, it doesn't take long, and it's just as much fun as pizzas and paintball. You build winning teams around a purpose, not a place. BCAT is the answer.
Welcome back to Business Talk Radio. We are joined today by Dr. Harry J. Aponte. We've been speaking live here in regards to how he's helping other therapists as well in his field. And again, we have Najeen Musavian joining us here from Los Angeles, and she's also a therapist. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So we're waiting for Dr. Aponte to rejoin the Zoom call. But in the meantime, what else is it that you'd like to add for our listeners today in regards to how you as a therapist have learned to relate and empathize with your clients?
I think the biggest thing, and over the course of my work with different clients, is really truly to be vulnerable and really use yourself in the therapy room. And sometimes I ask clients, like, if they've gone to therapy before, what didn't work? And they always say, my therapist barely said anything in sessions, or my therapist didn't talk about themselves, or I didn't know anything about my therapist. And so that shows you that really, if you be yourself and you bring yourself into the room, it makes a difference.
Great. And at this time, we do have Dr. Harry J. Aponte joining us once again. So thank you for this. Again, we're back here on Business Talk Radio. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Aponte.
Thank you.
Started without you for a quick second, but it's okay. So what else is it that you two like to discuss for the second half of the show today?
Nagin, do you want to say something about that?
Whatever you're the king right here. Whatever you want.
Well, what I'm really curious about is that you've said it in passing several times that it has changed the way you work. And I would like to hear more about that change.
So I would be lying if I said that ever since that breakthrough, everything is glorious with this client, because it hasn't been. And so every time I start to feel like frustrated with a client, or if I feel depleted, I start to analyze. I start to reflect on my own experience. Why do I feel this way? What's coming up for me that I leave the session feeling this way? And I channeled this in with not just this client, but every client. I leave the session and I reflect on how I feel. If I feel good about it, why do I feel good about it? If I feel depleted, why do I feel depleted? And I think that's the thing I learned working with Dr. Aponte, is really look within yourself. It's almost like a lie if you just go in there and do your thing and leave and being like, everything is good to go. You got to look within yourself.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, the worst possible thing is that when we get frustrated and then we just blame the client,
Exactly.
Rather than reflect about where we are and what's going on with us, because it's a delicate dance. We have to make a connection with something that is painful in the client's life, something that the person may be ashamed of or feel a great deal of anxiety about. And we have to do that in a way where the person feels safe to say, yeah, I'm really hurting. I'm failing at this. And that's not something that they can then say, I need you to relate to me this way or that way, as if they should know, okay? And we're not mind readers, but we are heart readers. If we allow ourselves to be open to our own experience with them, when we're with them, and when we reflect about the work that we're doing with them, because then we put ourselves in the test tube with them. Okay? And because of that, we end up intuiting things about what they're experiencing from our own life experience. And that then brings insight and makes it possible for us to get a sense of where people are, something that no textbook can do for us. We have to do this for ourselves. But it means taking a kind of risk. It means being vulnerable. It means looking at ourselves and saying, I got my own struggles. I know when I'm working with students and they tell me they're frustrated because this particular client didn't change when they made this intervention, and I already know something about their issues, and I say, well, what about your issues? Oh, well, I'm still working on those. Well, it's kind of difficult to change it, isn't it? And I know that because it's true of me. And so then we can, if we can identify with the client at that point and say, okay, it is difficult. The question is, why is it difficult for this person? I know for me how it's difficult and why it's difficult. And so then I can approach it from genuine concern, genuine curiosity, genuine feeling with them. Okay, and that creates an environment where people feel safer to take more of a risk with us. So at least that's how I see it. I don't know how you think about what I'm saying again.
No, you're absolutely right. It's even, my supervisor has told me this a million times. He's like, well, why is it bothering you with your client? Like, look within yourself. And I always wondered, I was like, why is it different when Dr. Aponte tells me this versus you? But it was because you related in you brought up your own struggle too. You told me about your own experience. And then I opened up. The same thing with your own clients. You got to bring yourself in. And that was the difference. We're told things, we can be guided, but once your own pain and your own struggle is brought into it, other people are going to be more open to it.
Yeah, and this is why, in the training that I do with students, and even with new supervisees, the first thing we talk about is, let's talk about your issues. And it's a little weird, that somebody would say to you, hi, shake my hands, and now tell me how you're messed up.
Like, isn't that my job to ask other people?
Yeah, right? You're like exempt from that question. No.
But in some way or another, we have to communicate that these struggles are common human struggles. That's really the point. And that we all fail, and we all aspire to do better, and we get discouraged with ourselves, and sometimes we do better, and sometimes we do best, and sometimes we don't want anybody to know how badly we did. But that is very common and very human. Okay, and if we can get that across in some form or another, okay, then it says to the person who's the client, who's the patient, oh, I can talk about this because we are on the same platform. And that's this very human, vulnerable, sensitive platform. So then people can open up, and then that's how we get to know them. We don't have X-ray machines, We have to create an environment that says it is safe for you to expose yourself around this issue that you want me to help you with. Okay. And I'm here with you.
And what's interesting is usually with clients, I use the term we. Every time I talk about things, I'm like, we go through stuff like this, or, to try to relate. And what was interesting is with this particular client, I didn't do that. And it was only until I started analyzing, what is it about this client that I'm so reserved? It's exactly the opposite of, what I usually channel. I tried to be this blank slate. I was, if she thought I was this perfect therapist that never went through problems, I channeled that. And that was the problem. It was like, even if she would interrupt me, it would put me more in like a position of, I can't share myself. I have to be this perfect person in front of her. And it was relating back to my own family struggles. It was exactly the same thing. I started realizing this is what I do within my own family dynamic. When I get interrupted or when I can't be heard, I start to go back in my shell. And what's funny is after the conference that we had, I remember my parents were watching. My sister was watching too. And afterwards, every time my parents would interrupt me, my sister's like, see, this is exactly what she's talking about when she said that. You interrupt her all the time. And it doesn't bother me anymore because I opened that up and started talking about it. But it's funny because
hopefully they do it a little less now that they really know.
Well, now they're more open to the feedback of, you're doing what we talked about.
And just a random question about this client that you were in touch with. Are you still treating her, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes, I am.
Over a year now, you said, right?
Yeah, it's over a year. And even now, there are certain sessions where she'll do something or say something that kind of irks me, but I'm not as shy to say it to her anymore. I bring it up to her.
Is she having any better success with relationships? Just curious. Has she?
Yeah, she tells me, I wish I had you sooner in my life. If I had you sooner in my life, I would have been married by now, is what she said. But
that's good news to hear then. Good.
yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
good because I don't leave feeling depleted. I think that's the biggest thing is therapists, we take on so much. You know, we have our own issues, we listen to other people. And I think it's only when you start to bring the two into each other, then it's healthier. You know, when you start to separate the two, you're feeling stressed in both elements of your life, whether it's work, your own personal life. When you start to bring that in your work too, I think it helps solve a lot of those tensions that you build up.
You know, another way of looking at it is that when the therapist goes in with the idea of I've learned all these interventions and I have all this theory in my head, and now I'm going to impart my great wisdom, you know, to the client. It's a one-down position for the client. It's not a mutual effort, and so then we put we put a burden upon ourselves and an expectation upon ourselves. Okay, then if we happen to succeed, then wonderful. But then if we fail, then I feel empty, you know, and because I'm making it all about me, you know, what I'm supposed to do, and what we're talking about here is eliciting a partner, saying to the person, let's do this together. I can't do this without you. You know, and when they experience and they get a sense that we really get them, that we really intuit them, we really have a feel for them, and that we really care about them, okay, they're much more likely then to engage with us, okay, to look at it and to try to do something about it. And we have a much better chance of working out some kind of resolution one way or another, but it's not all about us. It's not all about me, it's about us.
And they teach us, no matter how many interventions we learn, they tell us this, that the biggest for efficacy of therapy is the therapeutic relationship. And I don't know why we miss this part when we're doing therapy. We think, okay, I have CBT in my mind, I have psychodynamic, I have all these different interventions. But the biggest one is the therapeutic relationship. It's the us, not the me, not the you, it's the us.
And speaking of me, you, and the us, today we're here at Business Talk Radio. Got to remind listeners who we're speaking with today. Harry J. Aponte, best form of contact for you is?
HarryJAponte.com.
All right. And again?
Therapywithnagin.com.
Perfect. All right. So we still have 20 minutes left in the show. So we can still discuss if you'd like another case or anything, of course, on topic that Dr. Aponte wants to bring up. It'd be great to have more of an insight to listeners out there who are on the opposite side of your chair most days, right? And they go to people like you for all different sorts of reasons, anxiety, depression, right? Career changing, life issues, you name it. But as a therapist, it must weigh great on you. Like you said, you're supposed to leave it at the office, but you do take it home with you. Dr. Aponte, have you ever found a case where something bothered you and you really couldn't get through with a client? Like Nagin reached out to you to help her. Was there something that you ever had an issue with and you couldn't really get to the nitty gritty of someone and really empathize with them because of your own personal issue? Would you mind sharing if there's any stories like that?
Well, the ones that have been most difficult for me have been dealing with guys who are competitive with me, because the problem is that I tend to be competitive.
Okay.
And when I react very poorly when somebody tries to control me. At least I feel controlled by that person. This is all part of my family history. Okay, this is something that I'm sensitive to, because when I start feeling like I have to fight back, then I
Your
stop
peacock
listening.
feathers come out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I stopped listening. Because I still remember I've told the story before, but when my family moved, I'm an only child. When my family moved from Harlem to South Bronx, in my building, my tenement building, there was this big guy who then decided to be my best bully, you know, and he was a good deal bigger than I am and clearly stronger than I am. And he was a bully, and he was tormenting me. And then one day in the playground, he was doing it again, you know, and then I finally said to him, I said, all right, let's get into it. You know, I'm just not going to back down again, and we're going to settle it right now. And I was ready to be killed, you know, because I wasn't going to step back again. And when the guy saw that, he backed down. He said, no, I don't want to, you know, he got scared and he backed off. But to add to that, you know, was that when I walked out of the playground, my father had been spying on me. And he watched that encounter, you know, and I didn't have a great relationship with him. And that was the one time he put his arm around me and said, good job, son.
Wow.
All right. So that really just, you know, ingrained it in me, you know, back down, you know, and so when I have guys who then in some way or another challenge me, then I have to really pay attention to myself, you know, and to, well, it was like with that one example that I gave, you know, my first reaction was, okay, we're going to get into it. And then my second reaction was the more mature one that said, you're crazy, you know, this, you don't need this now. He doesn't need this now. This is not what you're about. And I had more control. But that's what Nagin is talking about, because she's talking about reflecting about herself. She's gotten into the habit as a therapist of saying, well, what am I doing? How is this affecting me? How is this influencing the way I'm doing my work? And it's that then that puts her in a position to be much wiser about how she uses herself in the relationship with her clients.
Right. And even, you know, when I meet with this client, she'll still do things that trigger me. And I'm not so quick to, you know, be defensive or retract. I'm calm and I look within myself. I'm like, okay, why is this bothering me? Why am I, you know, getting heated in this moment? I'm not going to react. I got to reflect. You know, we're so reactive as human beings. I think it's when we pause and reflect, then we can be the best versions of ourselves to help even the client and ourselves too in the relationship. But I think that it's really interesting when you shared that story. It just took me back to my own family stuff. And I'm like, either I go into my shell if I'm interrupted, or I start getting louder. And that was what I used when I talked to my client. I was like, I understand why you interrupt. I understand why you maybe talk louder. I get that. I've gone through that. That's what I did in my family. And it was that was the catalyst for the growth.
Well, she sure picked a good fit then for her therapist, right? Sometimes I think this world is connected in more ways than one, right? What's meant to be is meant to be. And sometimes people are brought to each other, not just because she looked you up in her, you know, medical book of insurance companies, you know, that if you accept, she found you. I don't know how, but who knew it would be such a great fit? That's great to hear.
And I think a lot of therapists, if you just start to be more yourself and be authentic and vulnerable, clients relate to you better. You know, that's the biggest thing. And if they don't, they'll find somebody else. I think we're so afraid that we're going to lose a client if we share too much or we're ourselves. But if that client is meant to be your client, they'll stay. You got to be vulnerable. Do you agree with me, Harry?
I, you know, well, you know, but when you say being vulnerable, you're really saying being human, you know, and showing your humanity, because you don't have to really tell them your story all the time, but you have to respond in a way that's authentic, and they feel you really are there with them. You're not just, as a therapist, you're not just observing them, you know, through some sort of microscope and examining, you know, to protect yourself. And it's when you make that connection that then people, they'll come back to you and they'll tell you, yeah, I worked that one, I didn't work this one. I've had people who I've worked with for some years, and it wasn't after like 2 or 3 years that they finally said, well, I never told you this about me. You know, and then they tell me something that's very embarrassing, but it took all that time for them to have that confidence in me to finally tell me the story. But they also knew that I remained committed to them,
Right.
and it finally came through to them, and they believed it. And then once they open it up, then it's not so difficult to be helpful. It's when you can't get over the fence and you don't know what's on the other side of the fence that it's really impossible to be helpful.
And staying committed, I think that's really key. I recently had a client tell me, I finally feel comfortable, where before I would worry about what I'm wearing or what I look like when I come to sessions, because I'm like, I have therapy, I have to look good. And it's only until now that I realize I don't need to wear my makeup. I can go in pajamas to therapy. And it's the commitment, it's almost like they're testing you out too for a little bit. They're trying to see if they can really be themselves. It's interesting. And right when you said that, I thought of the other client I have.
What other client?
I've seen her for over a year, longer than this other client I was talking about. And she suffers from very debilitating anxiety. And when she gets in this anxiety state, she will disappear, even with therapy. Like, she won't respond. She won't make an appointment. She'll be gone for like 3 weeks and then come back in. It's almost like she's testing out whether I'll still be there for her. It's interesting. And it's only recently that every week she shows up, she's responsive. This is the same one that now feels comfortable to not wear makeup and be in PJs. It's very interesting. And I don't know why. I try to understand why it is, but this is the biggest work we've ever done together. Now that she feels comfortable, she also is feeling better in her anxiety. I asked her, I was like, when was the last time you had a panic attack? She's like, I don't even remember the last time I had a panic attack. It's very interesting.
Well, I hear it from so many students once they've been in class and working with me for a while. I don't know why it is. I tend to hear it more from women than I do from men. But what I hear is, if he really got to know me, he wouldn't want to be with me. It's as if, I project a certain self that makes me attractive. And if he knew the real person that was behind that, he wouldn't want to stay with me. And it's one after another of the students who then reveal that part of themselves. And I say to them, if you weren't wounded in your own way, you would not be a good therapist. You wouldn't have the capacity to really empathize with somebody else's shame. The shame that you experience, they also experience. I'm inadequate. I'm not smart enough. I'm not engaging enough. I'm not this, I'm not that. Okay. You know it, you know what it's like, so do they. And then when they start talking about theirs, you can feel it, and you can feel for them. And once they experience that and they trust you, then they'll become partners with you in the work that has to be done.
Yeah, even my mom asked me that. She asked me, well, why do you think you're successful in your work? And what makes you different than other therapists? And I told her, I'm just myself. I'm exactly me that you see now. I'm myself in the therapy room. I say what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. I bring my own pain into it. That's the difference.
And I think you'd agree. You do the same too, right, Dr. Aponte?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. At this time of the show, we must give out our best forms of contact information. And if you don't mind, we'll start with you, Dr. Aponte.
HarryJAponte.com.
Fantastic.
TherapyWithNagin.com.
Great. And in closing, anything you want to say before we go? And just want to remind everyone, we will be back with more Dr. Aponte right on the radio show in just a few minutes. But Dr. Aponte, why don't you summarize this session for us today? I feel like it was a session. Kind of was, right? Conversation / session.
Well, it was a good one, because I think all three of us were truly present with one another. And I think that's what made it interesting for me. And I think that's what engages clients, and if you and as a client, if you feel your therapist is really not present with you, find another therapist.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate the conversation here on Business Talk Radio. Please stay tuned. We have more Business Talk Radio coming right up after the break, and it's going to be you, Dr. Jay Aponte. We'll be right back.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.